The pristine white walls of the selection chamber hummed with an otherworldly energy as 12-year-old Maya pressed her palm against the crystalline surface. Through the translucent barrier, she could see them, hundreds of potential parents arranged in perfect rows, each standing motionless in their individual pods, waiting to be chosen. Maya's breath fogged the crystal as she leaned closer, studying the faces of the adults before her. Some smiled hopefully, others maintained stoic expressions, and a few couldn't hide their desperation. Each pod displayed a holographic biography floating above the occupant's head. Occupation, personality traits, life experiences, and most importantly, their parental compatibility score. "Remember, Maya," the selection counselor's voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "You have exactly 1 hour to make your choice. Once you press the confirmation button, there's no going back. These will be your parents for the next 6 years, until your 18th birthday, when you achieve full independence." Maya nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. She had trained for this moment her entire life at the Preparation Academy, learning about different personality types, studying family dynamics, and understanding the psychological profiles that would complement her own emerging identity. But now, faced with the actual decision, everything felt overwhelming. She walked slowly past the first row of pods. A distinguished-looking man in his 40s caught her attention. Dr. Marcus Henderson, neurosurgeon, IQ 145, but his emotional availability score was alarmingly low at 2.3 out of 10. Next to him stood Sarah Chun, an artist with vibrant purple hair and paint-stained fingers. Her creativity index was off the charts, but her financial stability rating blinked red at 1.8. "These people chose to be here," Maya whispered to herself, remembering her lessons. "They applied, went through psychological evaluations, and waited months for approval to enter the selection pool. They want children, but they need us to want them back." As she continued her walk, Maya's eyes were drawn to a couple in pod 247. The woman had kind eyes and laugh lines around her mouth, while the man beside her radiated a quiet strength. Their compatibility scores were solid across all categories: emotional intelligence, financial stability, educational background, and conflict resolution skills. They seemed perfect on paper, but Maya had learned that perfection on paper didn't always translate to genuine connection. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine living with them, sharing meals, celebrating birthdays, navigating the inevitable arguments and misunderstandings that came with any family dynamic. "Attention, all selectors." The counselor's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You have 55 minutes remaining." Maya's heart raced. Somewhere in this room was the family that would shape her teenage years, influence her dreams, and help her transition into adulthood. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. She had grown up in the state-run academy, with other children preparing for their selection day. But now she realized that all their theoretical discussions about family dynamics paled in comparison to this moment of truth. The adults in these pods weren't just potential caregivers. They were real people with their own hopes, fears, and expectations. As Maya approached the middle section of the chamber, she noticed something that made her pause. In pod 156, a woman sat alone, her head bowed in what appeared to be prayer or deep meditation. Unlike the others who actively tried to make eye contact with passing children, this woman seemed lost in her own world. The holographic display above her pod was intriguing. Elena Rodriguez, age 38, former teacher turned social worker, widowed 3 years ago. Her scores were impressive across the board, but what caught Maya's attention was a small notation in red text: "Previous selection. Declined by child after 47 minutes of consideration." Maya felt a strange pull toward this woman who had been rejected before. There was something about her solitude, her apparent acceptance of whatever outcome awaited her, that spoke to Maya's own uncertainties about the process. But doubt crept in immediately. If another child had rejected her, what did that say about Elena? Was there something hidden beneath those impressive scores? Maya's training had emphasized the importance of trusting other children's judgments. They had no reason to make poor choices when their own futures were at stake. As she stood there contemplating, Maya became aware of other children moving through the chamber, some with confident strides toward their chosen families, others still searching with the same uncertainty she felt. The pressure was mounting. What if she made the wrong choice? What if the perfect family was just one row away, but she missed them because she was fixated on solving the mystery of the rejected woman? Maya forced herself to continue walking, but Elena Rodriguez's solitary figure lingered in her mind like an unfinished song. She needed to understand the system better before making such a crucial decision. The selection counselor had given them the basic rules during orientation, but Maya realized there were nuances she hadn't fully grasped. Counselor Harris. Maya spoke into the communication device, clipped to her sleeve. Can you explain why someone might be declined after 47 minutes of consideration? The response came through her earpiece, calm and professional. There are many reasons, Maya. Sometimes children realize they want a different family structure. Perhaps they initially considered a single parent, but decided they preferred a two-parent household. Other times, it's about lifestyle compatibility. The selection process is designed to prevent mismatches that could harm both child and potential parents. Maya nodded, but the explanation felt incomplete. She moved toward the information kiosks scattered throughout the chamber, where she could access more detailed profiles of the prospective parents. The interface responded to her touch, displaying a three-dimensional map of the entire selection chamber with color-coded indicators for different family types. Green pods housed traditional two-parent families. Blue indicated single parents. Yellow represented alternative family structures like grandparents or older siblings who had chosen to become guardians, and red marked special circumstances, parents with unique backgrounds or requirements. As Maya navigated the digital interface, she discovered something fascinating about the selection statistics. The data showed that children who spent longer considering their choices, particularly those who took 45 minutes or more, had significantly higher satisfaction rates in their eventual placements. But there is also a correlation between prolonged decision-making and the selection of what the system classified as high-risk, high-reward families. What exactly defines high-risk, high-reward? Maya wondered aloud. The information system responded with examples. Parents who were artists, entrepreneurs, or those who had overcome significant personal challenges. These families scored lower on traditional stability metrics, but often provided children with unique opportunities for growth, creativity, and resilience. Maya's training at the academy had emphasized the importance of stability, regular schedules, predictable income, established social networks. But now, surrounded by hundreds of real people with complex stories, she began questioning whether those priorities truly aligned with her deeper desires. She thought about her best friend at the academy, David, who had completed his selection 6 months earlier. He had chosen a family of scientists. Both parents were researchers with prestigious positions and impressive financial security. When he visited the academy to share his experience, he seemed content, but somehow diminished, as if the predictable structure of his new life had dulled his natural curiosity and spontaneity. Attention selectors, the counselor's voice filled the chamber again. You have 40 minutes remaining. Remember, the adults in these pods have been waiting for up to 6 months for this opportunity. They understand the gravity of your decision and respect whatever choice you make. This reminder struck Maya with unexpected force. These weren't just profiles on a screen or theoretical case studies from her textbooks. These were real people who had opened their lives to scrutiny, submitted themselves to psychological evaluations, and now stood vulnerable before children who held the power to accept or reject them. She watched as a 10-year-old boy approached Pod 89, where a young couple waited nervously. The boy placed his hand on the pod selection panel, and immediately the couple's faces lit up with joy. Soft music played as the pod opened, and the three of them embraced for the first time as a family. Maya felt a pang of something. Envy, perhaps, at the boy's certainty, or sadness at the knowledge that hundreds of other adults had just watched their chances of being chosen diminish by one. Maya decided to approach the selection process more systematically. She pulled up her own psychological profile on the kiosk, something she had never seen in its entirety before. The Academy had always shown her individual aspects of her personality and preferences, but never the complete picture. What she saw surprised her. Yes, she scored high on intellectual curiosity and independence, traits that would thrive with academically oriented families. But she also showed elevated scores for empathy, artistic sensitivity, and what the system called healing instinct, a drive to help others process trauma or difficulty. The system's AI made several recommendations based on her profile, highlighting families that would be statistically likely to provide the best match. But as Maya scrolled through the suggestions, she noticed that Elena Rodriguez wasn't among them. In fact, the AI flagged Elena's pod with a small warning symbol indicating potential emotional complexity. Maya felt a surge of rebellious curiosity. What if the system's algorithms, for all their sophistication, missed something essentially human about compatibility? What if the child who had rejected Elena after 47 minutes had made a mistake or simply had different needs than Maya did? She closed the kiosk interface and resumed walking through the chamber, but now with a different purpose. Instead of looking for the perfect family, she was searching for the family that needed her as much as she needed them. As she approached Elena's pod again, Maya noticed details she had missed before. Elena's hands bore small scars, not from accidents, but from deliberate service. Her fingernails were short and practical, her clothes comfortable but well-maintained, and most tellingly, she wore a small pin on her jacket that Maya recognized as a symbol used by grief counselors. But what would it mean to choose someone who had already been rejected? Would Maya forever wonder if she was Elena's second choice, a consolation prize after someone better had passed her by? Maya found herself standing in front of Elena's pod. Her reflection ghosted across the crystalline surface. Elena seemed to sense her presence and looked up, making direct eye contact for the first time. There was no desperation in her gaze, no pleading or performance, just a quiet acknowledgement of Maya's presence and what appeared to be genuine curiosity about who Maya was as a person. "Tell me about yourself," Maya whispered, knowing that Elena couldn't hear her through the pod's soundproof barrier, but somehow needing to speak the words anyway. She accessed Elena's full profile on her portable device, diving deeper than the basic statistics she had seen before. Elena Maria Rodriguez, born in a small coastal town, had become a teacher at 22 with dreams of transforming education. She had married her college sweetheart, Carlos, and together they had planned to adopt children. They had both grown up in the foster system and wanted to provide the stability they had craved as kids. But Carlos had died in an accident 3 years ago, just 2 months before they were scheduled to complete the adoption process under the old system. When the new child selection protocol was implemented worldwide, Elena had waited the mandatory 2-year healing period before applying to become a potential parent again. Maya read Elena's personal statement, written for prospective children. "I believe that families are built on understanding, not just biology or even choice. I want to learn who you are, not mold you into who I think you should be. I've learned that life is fragile and precious, and I promise to help you discover your own strength while providing a safe harbor when storms come." The words resonated with something deep in Maya's chest. She had grown up in an institution designed to prepare children for optimal family placement, but she had always felt like she was being shaped to fit into predefined molds rather than being encouraged to discover her authentic self. Maya's mind wandered to her recurring dreams, not the career aspirations or academic goals that the Academy focused on, but the deeper yearnings she rarely spoke about. She dreamed of having long conversations over breakfast, of someone who would listen to her thoughts about philosophy and meaning without trying to redirect her toward more practical concerns. She dreamed of being part of a family's healing process, not just benefiting from their stability. 35 minutes remaining, the counselor announced. Maya felt the pressure intensifying, but not in the way she had expected. Rather than feeling rushed to make any decision, she felt compelled to make the right decision, even if it defied conventional wisdom. She moved away from Elena's pod and deliberately visited several of the AI-recommended matches. Pod 45 housed the Johnsons, both engineers, financially secure, with a 5-year plan for Maya's education that would guarantee her acceptance to top universities. They seemed kind and intelligent, but their detailed life plan left little room for spontaneity or self-discovery. Pod 78 contained Drive and Mrs. Patterson, who had raised 3 previous selected children to successful adulthood. Their experience was impressive, their track record undeniable, but Maya felt like she would be entering a well-oiled machine rather than joining a family that would grow and change together. Each family she considered was objectively excellent, but Maya began to understand what her friend David might have lost in his scientifically optimal placement. These families offered security and achievement, but they might not offer the kind of profound connection and mutual growth that Maya was beginning to realize she craved. Maya returned to Elena's pod, this time accessing the detailed notes from the previous child's consideration period. The system recorded that 11-year-old Marcus had spent 47 minutes studying Elena's profile, had even initiated the preliminary bonding protocol, but had ultimately chosen the Stevens family instead, a decision that the follow-up report showed had been highly successful. But the notes revealed something interesting. Marcus had written in his decision log that he felt Elena deserved someone who could help her heal from her loss, and he didn't think he was emotionally mature enough for that responsibility. His choice wasn't a rejection of Elena's worth, but rather a recognition that they might not be the right fit for each other. Maya felt a strange sense of validation. Marcus had seen the same depth and complexity in Elena that attracted Maya, but he had recognized it as something beyond his capacity at that time. Maya, however, felt drawn to that complexity rather than intimidated by it. She had always been the child that others came to with their problems. Even at the academy, her peers sought her out when they needed someone to listen or help them process difficult emotions. Maybe this wasn't a burden she needed to avoid, but rather a strength she could contribute to a family dynamic. 28 minutes remaining. Maya placed her hand on Elena's pod, not yet pressing the selection button, but making contact. Elena looked up again, and this time Maya saw something that made her breath catch: recognition. Not just acknowledgement of Maya's presence, but a deeper recognition, as if Elena somehow understood who Maya was at her core. Maya thought about all the preparation, all the algorithms, all the statistical models designed to optimize family matching. But standing here, palm against the crystal barrier, she realized that the most important factor might be the simplest one: the mutual recognition of kindred spirits. Yet doubt still gnawed at her. What if she was romanticizing Elena's situation? What if the complexity that attracted her would become overwhelming once they were actually living together? What if Elena's grief, despite 3 years of healing, would overshadow Maya's adolescence? But then Maya asked herself a different question. What if Elena's experience with loss had given her a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of family connections? What if her work as a social worker had taught her skills that traditional families might lack? As Maya stood there wrestling with her decision, she noticed Elena had closed her eyes and seemed to be meditating again. There was something about her stillness, her acceptance of whatever outcome would unfold, that spoke to a wisdom Maya wanted to learn. Could this woman teach her how to find peace in uncertainty, how to build meaning after loss, how to choose hope even when life had proven itself unpredictable? Chapter 4, Testing the Waters. Maya's finger hovered over the preliminary selection button, the first step in the bonding protocol that would allow her to have a brief conversation with Elena before making her final decision. The academy had taught them that this preliminary phase was crucial. It was the only opportunity to gauge actual compatibility beyond the statistical profiles. "I'm going to initiate preliminary selection," Maya announced to her counselor. "Acknowledged. Remember, you'll have exactly 10 minutes for initial contact, and either party can terminate the process if you feel it's not a good fit." Maya pressed the button, and Elena's pod brightened with a soft blue glow. A small communication panel slid out from the pod's base, and Elena approached it with a gentle smile that seemed to light up her entire face. "Hello," Elena said, her voice warm and slightly nervous. "I'm Elena. What would you like me to call you?" The question surprised Maya. Most adults immediately use the child's name from their profile, But Elena was asking what Maya preferred, a small gesture that somehow felt significant. Maya is fine. I wanted to ask you about something I saw in your file. Elena nodded encouragingly. Ask me anything. This is your decision, and you deserve honest answers. Why do you want to be selected? I mean, after what happened with your husband, after being declined before. Why put yourself through this process? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her response carefully. I could give you the answer I gave the evaluation committee, about wanting to provide a stable home, about having so much love to give. And those things are true. But the deeper truth is that I learned something when Carlos died. She paused, meeting Maya's eyes through the crystal barrier. I learned that love isn't diminished by loss. It's concentrated. When someone you love dies, you don't have less love to give. You have more urgent love, more intentional love. I want to share that with someone who's ready to build something meaningful together. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. This wasn't the safe, predictable answer she might have gotten from other potential parents. This was raw honesty that acknowledged both strength and vulnerability. The child who considered you before. Marcus, he wrote that he thought you needed someone to help you heal. Do you think that's true? Elena's expression grew thoughtful. Marcus was a wise boy, and he wasn't wrong. But healing isn't something someone else does for you. It's something you choose to do, sometimes with others, sometimes alone. I've been healing for 3 years. What I'm offering isn't my wounds, but what I've learned from them. What have you learned? That every day is both precious and uncertain. That resilience isn't about avoiding pain, but about finding meaning in it. That families aren't just about providing for each other. They're about witnessing each other's growth. Maya felt a stirring of recognition. These concepts aligned with thoughts she'd had, but never been able to articulate. What would you want from me if I chose you? Elena smiled. I want you to be authentically yourself, even when that's difficult or inconvenient. I want you to challenge me. Teach me things I don't know. Show me the world through your eyes. I'd want us to be honest with each other, even when honesty is uncomfortable. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I'm difficult or moody or disappointing? Then you'd be a normal teenager. Elena laughed. Maya, I'm not looking for a perfect child. I'm looking for a real one. Someone I can grow alongside. Someone who will help me become a better person while I hopefully do the same for them. Maya felt tears threatening to spill. No one at the academy had ever suggested that she might contribute to an adult's growth, that her perspective might be valuable rather than something that needed constant correction and guidance. Can you tell me about your work? Maya asked. I work with families in crisis, usually situations involving trauma, loss, or major life transitions. I help people communicate with each other when they've forgotten how, help them rebuild trust when it's been broken. It's challenging work, but it's taught me that healing happens in relationships, not in isolation. Do you bring that work home with you? Elena considered this carefully. I try not to bring the heaviness home, but I do bring the skills. I've learned how to really listen, how to create safe spaces for difficult conversations, how to help people process complex emotions. Those aren't just professional skills, they're life skills. Maya realized she was learning more about what she wanted in a family through this conversation than she had in months of theoretical preparation. She wanted depth, authenticity, and mutual respect. She wanted someone who would see her struggles as normal rather than problems to be solved. What would our daily life look like? Maya asked. That would depend on what you need and want. I believe in structure, but flexible structure. Regular meals together, consistent bedtimes, expectations around school and responsibilities, but also room for spontaneity, for following interests wherever they lead, for deep conversations that might last past bedtime sometimes. Maya glanced at her timer. She had 3 minutes left in the preliminary phase. Elena, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you lonely? Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. Yes, sometimes I am. But loneliness taught me to appreciate connection when it comes. I think maybe we're all a little lonely, even in families. The goal isn't to eliminate loneliness, but to share it with people who understand. Maya felt something click into place. She had been lonely at the academy, surrounded by peers and caregivers, but somehow still feeling fundamentally alone with her deeper thoughts and questions. Elena was acknowledging that loneliness was part of the human condition, not something to be ashamed of or fixed. "One more question," Maya said as her timer showed 1 minute remaining. "If I choose you, what do you hope we'll accomplish together?" Elena smiled. "I hope we'll help each other become more fully ourselves. I hope we'll create a home where difficult questions are welcome, where growth is celebrated even when it's messy, where love is expressed through attention rather than just provision. I hope we'll be a family that faces life together rather than just coexisting." The timer chimed, indicating that the preliminary phase was complete. Maya had to make her decision now, either proceed to final selection or continue searching. But as she looked at Elena's face, radiant with hope but prepared for disappointment, Maya realized that her search was over. She had found someone who saw her as a complete person rather than a project, someone whose depth matched her own, someone who offered partnership rather than just guardianship. What remained was finding the courage to trust her instincts over the statistical recommendations, to choose complexity over simplicity, to choose growth over safety. Maya's hand trembled as she reached for the final selection button, but before she could press it, the chamber's lights flickered and an unusual announcement echoed through the speakers. "All selectors, please pause your decision-making process. We are implementing a mandatory 5-minute reflection period due to an unprecedented situation." Maya looked around in confusion. In the far corner of the chamber, she saw a commotion near one of the red pods, those marked for special circumstances. A 12-year-old girl was arguing intensely with her counselor, pointing at the pod and shaking her head vehemently. "What's happening?" Maya asked through her communication device. "Please remain calm, Maya. We occasionally encounter situations where additional information becomes relevant to the selection process. Use this time to confirm your decision." But Maya's curiosity was piqued. She had never heard of a mandatory reflection period, and the tension in the counselor's voice suggested this was more serious than a routine pause. She walked toward the disturbance, staying within earshot but trying to appear casual. The girl was speaking rapidly to her counselor. "You didn't tell us that some of these people have been in the system for years. This woman has been rejected by 17 children over 3 years. 17. There has to be a reason, and we have the right to know what it is." Maya's blood went cold. She looked back toward Elena's pod, wondering if this could possibly be referring to her potential choice. But Elena's file had only mentioned one previous consideration, not 17 rejections. The counselor was trying to calm the agitated girl. "Sarah, you're misunderstanding the data. Pod 341 represents a unique situation that we should have flagged more clearly. Mrs. Patterson has specific requirements that most children aren't prepared for. Her repeated presence in the selection pool isn't a reflection of her worthiness as a parent." "What requirements?" Sarah demanded. Maya crept closer, her heart pounding. She was learning that the selection process had layers of complexity that hadn't been revealed during their preparation. Mrs. Patterson specifically requests children who have experienced significant trauma themselves. She's a former therapist who believes she can best serve children who need specialized understanding. Most children in the selection process haven't had those experiences, so they're naturally not drawn to her profile. This information hit Maya like a physical blow. There were potential parents who specialized in damaged children, and there were aspects of the selection process that the Academy had never mentioned. What else hadn't they been told? Sarah seemed partially satisfied with this explanation, but Maya's mind was racing with new questions. She returned to her communication device. "Counselor Harris, I need complete transparency about something. Are there hidden aspects of potential parents' profiles that we don't see unless we specifically ask?" A long pause. "Maya, all legally relevant information is provided in the standard profiles. Some parents choose to include additional details in their extended files, but I want to see Elena Rodriguez's extended file. All of it." Another pause. "Are you certain? Extended files sometimes contain information that can be overwhelming or confusing without proper context." "I'm certain." Maya's portable device chimed as the extended file uploaded. What she saw made her knees weak. Elena's profile contained detailed notes from her previous consideration by Marcus, but also contained information about her work that went far beyond the basic social worker designation. Elena specialized in working with families affected by suicide. Her husband Carlos hadn't died in an accident. He had taken his own life during a severe depressive episode. Elena had found him, had performed CPR unsuccessfully, had lived through the trauma of losing someone to mental illness. The notes revealed that Elena's work with grief counseling was specifically focused on families dealing with suicide, and that she had requested to be matched with children who had lost parents or siblings to similar circumstances. The system had apparently modified her profile to remove the most painful details while preserving her essential qualifications. Maya sat down heavily in one of the chamber's meditation alcoves. This changed everything, or did it? Elena's honesty during their conversation took on new depth. When she had talked about learning that love becomes more urgent after loss, she was speaking from the most profound kind of loss. When she discussed healing happening in relationships, she was drawing on expertise born from unimaginable pain. But Maya also realized why Marcus had felt unequal to the emotional complexity Elena represented. At 11, he simply hadn't experienced enough of life's darkness to understand what Elena was offering. Maya, however, had her own hidden depths. Her file probably didn't reveal that her birth parents had both struggled with depression, that she had spent her early years in a household shadowed by mental illness before entering the academy system. The counselors had worked hard to help her process and move beyond those early experiences, but they had shaped her understanding of human fragility in ways that her peers might not possess. Attention selectors, the announcement system crackled back to life. The reflection period has ended. You may resume your decision-making process. 18 minutes remain. Maya felt the weight of newfound knowledge settling over her. Elena hadn't been dishonest. She had answered every question truthfully, but the system had withheld information that might be crucial to Maya's decision. She walked back to Elena's pod, studying her face with new eyes. The quiet strength Maya had admired now revealed itself as hard-won wisdom. The peace Elena seemed to embody was the peace of someone who had looked into the abyss and chosen to continue living, loving, and serving. Maya initiated the communication system again. Elena, I've just learned some additional information about your background. Can we talk about Carlos? Elena's face immediately showed understanding and a flicker of pain, but she nodded. What would you like to know? How did he die? Elena took a deep breath. Carlos took his own life 3 years ago. He had been struggling with depression for months, and despite treatment, therapy, and medication, he lost his battle. I found him in our garage on a Tuesday morning. The raw honesty was devastating and admirable. Elena wasn't trying to soften the truth or protect Maya from its harshness. How did that change you? Maya asked quietly. It taught me that love alone isn't always enough to save someone, but it's always worth giving. It taught me that mental illness is a disease, not a choice or a failure. It taught me that survivors carry both wounds and wisdom, and both are valuable. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. Does that experience make you want to save other people? Elena shook her head gently. No, Maya. It taught me that I can't save anyone, but I can accompany people through their struggles, witness their pain without trying to fix it, and help them find their own reasons to keep going. There's a difference between saving and supporting. Maya realized that Elena's experience with tragedy had given her exactly the skills Maya had been unconsciously seeking. Someone who could handle emotional complexity without being overwhelmed by it. Someone who understood that healing was a process rather than a destination. If I chose you, would you see me as someone who needs healing? I would see you as someone who is already healing every day just by growing and learning and becoming yourself. We're all healing from something, Maya. The question is whether we heal alone or with people who understand the journey. Maya felt the last of her doubts dissolving. Elena's tragedy wasn't a red flag. It was a testament to her resilience and her capacity for continued love despite devastating loss. But choosing Elena would mean embracing complexity over simplicity, depth over surface tranquility, growth through challenge rather than growth through protection. It would mean trusting that she was strong enough to handle the emotional richness that Elena offered. With 12 minutes remaining on the selection clock, Maya made her choice. She pressed the final selection button, and Elena's pod filled with golden light. The crystalline barrier began to dissolve, and for the first time, Maya heard Elena's voice without electronic mediation. "Thank you," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for choosing us." But before Maya could step forward to embrace her new mother, alarms began blaring throughout the selection chamber. Red lights flashed, and the automated system announced, "Selection protocol violation. Initiating emergency review. All active selections suspended pending investigation." Maya's heart lurched. Through the chamber speakers, she heard raised voices from the control room above. Elena's pod barrier, which had been dissolving, suddenly solidified again, trapping them on opposite sides just moments after Maya had made her irrevocable choice. "What's happening?" Maya called to her counselor through the communication system. "Please remain calm, Maya. There appears to be an irregularity with some of the profiles in today's selection pool. We need to verify all information before completing any placements." Maya watched in horror as security personnel entered the chamber and began escorting some of the potential parents away from their pods. The children who had already made selections stood frozen, watching their newly chosen families being removed for reasons no one would explain. Elena pressed her hand against the pod barrier, meeting Maya's palm on the other side. "Whatever happens," she said through the intercom, "I want you to know that choosing me was the bravest thing anyone has ever done. You looked beyond fear and statistics and chose connection. That matters, regardless of what comes next." "Elena, what's happening? Are you going to be taken away?" Before Elena could answer, Counselor Harris approached Maya with a grim expression. "Maya, we need to talk privately. There's been a significant development regarding several parents in today's selection pool." Maya refused to move from Elena's pod. "Whatever you need to tell me, you can say it here. Elena deserves to hear it too." The counselor looked uncomfortable, but continued. "We've discovered that 17 of today's potential parents, including Elena Rodriguez, have been providing false or incomplete information about their backgrounds. The selection authority is conducting a full investigation." "What kind of false information?" Maya demanded. "We can't discuss details while the investigation is ongoing, but I can tell you that Elena's file contains several discrepancies that should have disqualified her from the selection pool." Maya felt her world tilting. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had Elena manipulated her somehow? But looking at Elena's face, Maya saw only confusion and growing concern, not guilt or deception. "Elena," Maya called through the intercom. "What discrepancies could they be talking about?" "I don't know, Maya. I provided complete and honest information throughout the application process. Everything I told you today was true." Counselor Harris pulled up Elena's file on a portable device. "Elena Rodriguez, you indicated on your application that your husband died in an automobile accident. Our investigation has revealed that Carlos Rodriguez died by suicide. This is a material misrepresentation that affects your psychological evaluation and suitability rating." Elena's face went white. "That's not true. I disclosed Carlos's suicide in my initial application. I spoke about it extensively during my psychological evaluations. It was never hidden information." Maya's mind raced. Something didn't add up. Elena had just told her about Carlos's suicide when she asked directly. Why would someone lie on an application but then tell the truth spontaneously during conversation? "Counselor Harris," Maya said, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. "Elena told me about Carlos's suicide when I asked about it 20 minutes ago. She was completely honest and open. If she were hiding it, why would she volunteer that information?" The counselor looked surprised. "She discussed the suicide during your preliminary conversation?" "Yes, in detail. She told me she found him, that he had been struggling with depression, that she learned important lessons about love and loss from the experience." Counselor Harris frowned and began scrolling through Elena's digital file more carefully. After several minutes, his expression changed from stern to confused to embarrassed. There appears to be a significant error in our records. Elena, the file I was reviewing shows your application from 2 years ago when you first applied to be a potential parent. At that time, you did indicate automobile accident as cause of death. But there's a more recent update to your file from 6 months ago where you corrected this information and provided full disclosure about the suicide. Elena sagged with relief. Yes, that's correct. When I reapplied after my healing period, I realized that I had been trying to protect myself by softening the truth. I updated everything to be completely honest about Carlos's death and my own journey through grief. Maya felt a surge of vindication, but also anger at the system that had just put Elena through unnecessary trauma. So there was no deception, no material misrepresentation? It appears not, the counselor admitted. Elena, I apologize for the distress. There seems to have been a database error that showed your original application information instead of your current, complete file. But even as Counselor Harris apologized, the alarms continued blaring, and other potential parents were still being removed from their pods. Maya realized that Elena might be cleared, but something larger was happening in the selection chamber. What about the other parents who were flagged? Maya asked. The counselor's expression grew grim again. That's a more serious situation. We've discovered that someone has been systematically altering profiles to hide information that would disqualify certain individuals from the selection process. Elena appears to have been caught up in this investigation by mistake, but there are others who genuinely were providing false information. Maya watched as more security personnel entered the chamber. Children who had made selections were crying as their chosen families were led away. The carefully orchestrated process that was supposed to guarantee optimal matches was dissolving into chaos and uncertainty. Can I still proceed with my selection of Elena? Maya asked. Your selection is valid, but given today's irregularities, all placements are being suspended for 72 hours while we verify the integrity of our entire system. Maya felt devastated. After all the emotional intensity of choosing Elena, after the connection she had felt, after the courage it had taken to trust her instincts, she was being told to wait indefinitely while bureaucrats investigated problems that apparently had nothing to do with her chosen mother. This isn't fair, Maya said, her voice rising. Elena was honest. I made an informed choice. Why should we be penalized because other people were dishonest? Elena spoke through the intercom, her voice gentle but firm. Maya, fairness sometimes means enduring inconvenience to protect everyone's safety. If there are people in the system who shouldn't be here, it's worth taking time to identify them, even if it delays our family formation. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to demand immediate placement, wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But Elena's response reminded her why she had chosen this woman in the first place. Even in crisis, Elena was thinking about the bigger picture, about protecting other children rather than just advocating for her own desires. As the chamber continued its descent into chaos around them, Maya pressed her palm against the pod barrier and made Elena a promise. I will wait for you. However long this takes, whatever we have to go through, I'm not changing my mind. You are my choice. Elena smiled through her tears. And you're mine, Maya. We'll get through this together, even if we have to be apart for a little while. But as security personnel approached Elena's pod with official documentation, Maya realized that the crisis was far from over, and their newly formed family bond was about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. The 72-hour suspension stretched into a week as investigators uncovered a conspiracy that shook the entire child selection system. Maya found herself back at the academy, surrounded by other children whose selections had been derailed by the investigation, all of them struggling with uncertainty and disappointment. Maya learned that a former selection authority administrator had been systematically altering profiles, not to help unsuitable parents get selected, but to create artificial obstacles for certain demographic groups. The conspiracy was rooted in prejudice. Single parents, those who had experienced mental health challenges, and families from certain socioeconomic backgrounds have been having negative information added to their files or positive attributes hidden. Elena had been caught in this web, not because of her own honesty, but But because the conspirator had targeted her specifically after Carlos's suicide, believing that anyone touched by mental illness was inherently unstable. The database errors weren't errors at all. They were deliberate sabotage designed to prevent children from choosing families that didn't fit narrow definitions of acceptability. Maya, Counselor Harris explained during one of their daily check-ins, Elena Rodriguez was actually one of the most qualified potential parents in the entire system. Her psychological evaluations were exemplary. Her compatibility scores were in the 98th percentile, and her life experience provided her with extraordinary empathy and resilience. Someone went to great lengths to hide these qualifications from you and other potential children. Maya felt a complex mixture of vindication and rage. She had trusted her instincts despite the system's subtle discouragement, but it infuriated her to learn that the discouragement had been artificial and discriminatory. How many other families were affected? Maya asked. We're still investigating, but it appears that over 300 potential parents had their profiles manipulated over the past 2 years. Some are made to look less qualified than they actually were, while others had red flags removed that should have remained visible. Maya thought about all the children who might have made different choices if they had been given accurate information. How many perfect families have been overlooked because someone decided they didn't meet arbitrary standards of acceptability? As the investigation continued, Maya was given the option to return to the selection chamber for a new choice. The academy counselors gently suggested that she might want to reconsider her decision in light of everything that had happened. Not because of any question about Elena's qualifications, which had been thoroughly verified, but because of the trauma associated with their selection process. Sometimes, her academic advisor suggested, it's better to start fresh rather than try to build a relationship that began with such chaos and stress. But Maya had been thinking deeply about what it meant to choose someone, and she realized that real choice wasn't just about the initial decision. It was about the ongoing commitment to stand by that choice even when circumstances became difficult. Maya requested a private meeting with the selection authority's lead investigator, a stern woman named Director Chun who had been brought in to clean up the corrupted system. Director Chun, I want to understand why Elena Rodriguez was specifically targeted by this conspiracy. The director consulted her files. Elena represented everything that the perpetrator believed made an unsuitable parent. She was a single woman. She had been touched by mental illness through her husband's suicide, and she worked with families in crisis situations. In the conspirator's mind, these factors made her inherently risky. But those are exactly the factors that make her an extraordinary parent, Maya argued. Her strength, her understanding of human complexity, her ability to handle difficult emotions. These aren't weaknesses, they're superpowers. Director Chin looked at Maya with new respect. That's a remarkably mature perspective. Most children your age would focus on security and predictability. Maybe most children my age haven't learned yet that the most important growth happens when we choose depth over simplicity. Maya took a deep breath and made her request. I want to finalize my selection of Elena Rodriguez. Not because the investigation cleared her. I was ready to choose her even when I thought she might be complicated. I want to choose her because I believe we can help each other become better people. Director Chun was quiet for a long moment. Maya, you understand that Elena's life will never be simple? She works with traumatized families, she carries her own grief, and she's chosen a profession that exposes her to human pain on a daily basis. Yes, Maya said firmly, and I understand that choosing her means I'm choosing to grow up in a family where difficult emotions aren't hidden or fixed, but witnessed and processed. I'm choosing to learn how to love people through their struggles, not just during their successes. And you're certain this is what you want? There are hundreds of other qualified families who could provide more traditional stability. Maya thought about her friend David, content but somehow diminished in his scientifically optimal placement. She thought about all the Academy's emphasis on predictable outcomes and risk mitigation. Then she thought about Elena's face when she talked about learning to love more urgently after loss, about her work helping families heal from trauma, about her recognition that loneliness was part of the human condition but didn't have to be faced alone. Director Chun, I'm not looking for traditional stability. I'm looking for authentic connection. I want to be part of a family that faces life's complexities together rather than trying to avoid them. The director smiled, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from her during the entire investigation. In that case, let's finalize your placement. Elena Rodriguez has been waiting very patiently, and I think you two have a remarkable journey ahead of you. As Maya left the meeting, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had chosen not just a mother, but a way of being in the world. She had chosen growth over comfort, depth over surface tranquility, authentic relationship over predictable outcomes. The selection process had been designed to protect children from making poor choices, but Maya realized that the most important choice wasn't avoiding risk. It was choosing the right risks, the ones that would challenge her to become more fully herself, while contributing to someone else's growth. Elena had been waiting not just through the investigation, but through 3 years of grief, months of evaluation, and a previous rejection by another child. She had remained open to connection despite repeated disappointment, had continued believing in the possibility of family despite profound loss. Maya understood now that choosing Elena wasn't just about finding a parent. It was about becoming the kind of person who could recognize depth, appreciate resilience, and commit to the hard work of authentic relationship. She was ready to go home. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in the doorway of Elena's modest apartment, holding a single suitcase that contained everything she owned from her 12 years at the academy. The space was warm and lived in, filled with books, artwork from Elena's work with families, and photographs that told stories of a life fully experienced rather than carefully curated. Elena didn't rush to embrace her or overwhelm her with enthusiasm. Instead, she simply smiled and said, "Welcome home, Maya. Would you like to see your room first? Or should we sit and talk about how you're feeling about all of this?" Maya felt a wave of gratitude for Elena's intuitive understanding that this transition needed to happen at Maya's pace. "Can we talk first? I have questions about everything." They sat on Elena's comfortable couch, and Maya found herself studying her new mother's face, no longer through crystal barriers or communication devices, but in the natural light of their shared living space. Elena looked somehow both exactly as Maya had expected and completely different. The strength was still there, but softened by the vulnerability of opening her home and heart to someone new. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked gently. "I'm thinking that I made the right choice, but I'm also scared about whether I can be what you need me to be." Elena considered this seriously. "Can you tell me more about that fear? You've been through so much, and you've learned so much from your experiences. What if I'm just a normal teenager with normal problems? What if I can't match the depth that you're offering?" Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Maya, do you know what I was most afraid of during the selection process?" Maya shook her head. "I was afraid that I'd become so shaped by grief and loss that I wouldn't know how to simply enjoy everyday moments with a child. I was afraid that my depth, as you call it, might overshadow your lightness." Maya felt something loosening in her chest. "So we're both worried about being too much or not enough." "Exactly. And maybe that's how we know we're right for each other. We both understand that relationships require us to grow into new versions of ourselves." Over the next few hours, Elena showed Maya around their home. Not just the physical spaces, but the rhythms and traditions that would shape their daily life. Maya learned that Elena played piano every evening, that she kept a garden on the fire escape where she grew herbs for cooking, that she had a ritual of writing in a journal every morning while drinking coffee. "These are my routines," Elena explained, "but they're not rules. If you want to join me for any of them, you're welcome. If you need space to develop your own routines, that's equally important." Maya felt herself relaxing into the possibility of belonging somewhere that felt authentic rather than institutional. She had never lived in a space where personal preferences and individual rhythms were not just tolerated but celebrated. That evening, as Elena prepared dinner, Maya found herself naturally gravitating toward helping. Not because it was required, but because she genuinely wanted to participate in the domestic ritual of nourishing themselves. As they worked together, Maya felt a profound sense of rightness that had nothing to do with statistics or compatibility scores, and everything to do with the simple pleasure of shared purpose. Elena, Maya said as they sat down to eat, can you tell me about some of the families you work with? I want to understand what that part of your life is like. Elena paused, clearly considering how much to share with someone so young. I work with families who are trying to rebuild after crisis, sometimes death, sometimes divorce, sometimes addiction or mental illness. My job is to help them remember how to communicate with each other, how to trust again, how to find hope when everything feels broken. Does it ever get overwhelming? Sometimes, but it also reminds me every day how precious it is when people choose to love each other despite uncertainty, despite the possibility of loss. Every family I work with is proof that humans are capable of extraordinary resilience. Maya understood that Elena's work wasn't separate from their family life. It was part of what Elena brought to their relationship. Her professional skills in creating safe spaces for difficult conversations, in helping people process complex emotions, in recognizing the difference between supporting and rescuing would all benefit their family dynamic. After dinner, Elena suggested they spend some time on the fire escape, tending her small garden together. As they watered plants and trimmed herbs, Maya felt herself settling into the rhythm of shared domestic life in ways she had never experienced before. Maya, Elena said as they watched the sunset paint the city skyline in warm colors, I want you to know that this is not an experiment or a trial period for me. When you chose me in that chamber, you became my daughter. Not conditionally, not pending some evaluation of how well we work together, but permanently. Whatever challenges we face them as family. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it felt like coming up for air after being underwater for years. I need you to know something too, she said. I chose you not despite your complexity, but because of it. I want to learn how to love the way you love. Urgently, intentionally, without guarantees. Elena reached over and took Maya's hand. We're going to make mistakes, you know. I'm going to be overprotective sometimes because I know how fragile life can be. You're going to push boundaries and test our connection because that's what teenagers do. We're going to have arguments and misunderstandings. But we'll figure it out together. We'll figure it out together. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the city transition from day to night, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The selection process had been designed to optimize outcomes, to minimize risk, to ensure the best possible matches between children and families. But Maya realized that the most important factor hadn't been algorithmic compatibility. It had been the courage to choose authenticity over safety, depth over simplicity, growth over comfort. Elena had been rejected by Marcus not because she was inadequate, but because she offered something he wasn't ready for. She had been targeted by the conspiracy not because she was dangerous, but because she challenged narrow definitions of acceptability. She had been waiting not just for any child, but for the right child, one who could appreciate what she offered and contribute their own unique gifts to the relationship. Maya understood now that families weren't just about providing for each other or even about loving each other. They were about witnessing each other's becoming, about choosing again and again to grow together through whatever life brought their way. Elena, Maya said as they prepared to go inside, what do you think my birth parents would think about my choice? Elena was quiet for a long moment, clearly understanding the weight of the question. I think they would be proud that you chose connection over safety, that you recognized love even when it came wrapped in complexity. I think they would be grateful that you found someone who sees your depth as a gift rather than a burden to be managed. Maya nodded, feeling a sense of completion she hadn't expected. Her birth parents had struggled with depression, had been unable to provide the stability she needed, but they had given her something else, an understanding of human fragility that made her capable of appreciating Elena's strength. As they settled into Elena's cozy living room for the evening, Maya curled up next to her new mother on the couch, feeling truly at home for the first time in her memory. Elena began reading aloud from a book of poetry, something she had mentioned doing every evening as part of her routine, and Maya found herself drifting into a state of profound contentment. The selection process had promised optimal matches and predictable outcomes, but Maya had discovered something more valuable: the deep satisfaction that came from making choices based on authentic recognition rather than statistical compatibility. She had chosen Elena not because algorithms recommended her, but because something fundamental in Maya's soul had recognized something fundamental in Elena's. As Elena's voice filled the room with words about love, loss, hope, and resilience, Maya understood that she hadn't just chosen a parent. She had chosen a way of being in the world that honored both strength and vulnerability, that embraced complexity rather than fearing it, that recognized growth as a lifelong journey rather than a destination to reach. The world had given children the power to choose their parents, believing this would lead to better outcomes. But Maya had learned that the real power wasn't in the choosing itself. It was in the courage to choose authentically, to trust connection over convenience, to build relationships that challenged everyone involved to become more fully themselves. Outside their window, the city hummed with millions of lives unfolding, millions of choices being made, millions of people learning how to love each other imperfectly but intentionally. And inside their small apartment, a new family continued the ancient work of witnessing each other's growth, of choosing each other again and again, of creating meaning through connection. Maya closed her eyes and listened to Elena's voice, weaving stories of human resilience into the evening air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth, new chances to choose love over fear. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, home with someone who had seen her clearly and chosen her completely, someone who would help her become more fully herself while she did the same in return. The selection process had ended, but their real journey as a family was just beginning.